$1,518,287. That's the average net worth of someone in their 50s in America, according to Federal Reserve data compiled this year. If you're in that decade and nowhere close, that number alone can wreck your whole week. Except here's the part almost nobody shows you next to it. The median net worth for that exact same age group, 50 to 59, is $222,358. Same age bracket. One number is nearly 7 times the other. And almost every net worth by age chart you've ever screenshotted, saved, or quietly panicked over is built on the wrong one. My name is Joey, and on this channel, I want to teach you how to save, invest, use, and grow your money so you can have more freedom and retire earlier without depending on the government. Subscribe to the channel and like this video.
Here's why this matters so much for the specific audience. If you're a Henry, a high earner who hasn't built serious wealth yet, you've almost certainly Googled net worth by age at some point. Usually right after a birthday, a reunion, or a LinkedIn post from someone your age announcing an exit. And what comes back first on nearly every site is the average. Not because it's more accurate, because it's the bigger, more attention-grabbing number, and attention is the business model. The problem is that average and typical are not the same word, even though we use them like they are. National average net worth sits around $1.06 million. National median net worth sits around $192,700. That gap exists because average gets dragged upward by a small number of extremely wealthy households in every single bracket. The same way a room full of regular earners has its average income wrecked the moment one billionaire walks in. Median doesn't move like that. Median tells you where the person in the actual middle stands, not where the math gets pulled by outliers at the top. So when a Henry compares themselves to the average and comes up short, they're often comparing themselves to a number that only a thin slice of ultra-wealthy households anywhere near their age actually hit. That's not motivation. That's just a bad benchmark producing a false.
And it's not just net worth by age doing this. Ask Americans what number it takes to be considered wealthy in 2026. And the answer that comes back, according to Charles Schwab's own research, is $2.3 million. Not what it takes to be comfortable, not what it takes to retire, what it takes to be considered wealthy at all. That's the same inflated benchmark problem showing up everywhere you look for a number to measure yourself against. And almost none of those numbers are asking what actually matters, which is whether your money can eventually replace your paycheck. Let's run the real numbers, decade by decade, average against median using Federal Reserve and Empower data. In your 30s, average net worth is $379,562. Median, for the closest matching bracket, is $135,600. The average is already about 2.5 times the median. In your 40s, average net worth is $853,347. Median for that bracket comes in around $247,200. Now the average is roughly 3.5 times the median. In your 50s, average net worth is $1,518,287. Median is $222,358. The gap has widened to almost 7 times. Notice the pattern. The gap between average and median doesn't stay constant. It grows with age. That's not a coincidence. The longer people have had money in the market, the more room compounding has to turn a handful of already wealthy households into extremely wealthy ones, which drags the average further and further away from what a typical household actually has. The median, meanwhile, moves in a much more boring, much more realistic line, because it's tracking the actual middle of the pack, not the tail. This isn't a small statistical footnote either. Federal Reserve data shows the top 10% of households by net worth hold roughly 2/3 of all household wealth in the country. When 1 in 10 households is holding that much of the total, of course the average gets pulled somewhere the other 9 almost never reach. The math isn't broken. It's doing exactly what averages do when the underlying distribution is this lopsided. It's just being pointed at the wrong question. Here's what that means in practice. If you're in your 40s with a net worth of, say, $300,000, the average tells you you're less than half of where you should be. The median tells you you're already ahead of the typical household in your bracket. Same person, same bank account, two completely different verdicts, and only one of them is measuring the thing you should actually care about. Now, you might be thinking, sure, but the average is still a real number. Why not care about it at all? Fair question. The issue isn't that average is fake, it's that using it as your personal benchmark quietly rewires how safe you feel, regardless of how you're actually doing. This is the same mechanism behind a lot of Henry anxiety. You're not comparing yourself to reality, you're comparing yourself to a number engineered by a tiny group of outliers, and then treating the resulting gap as a verdict on your own discipline. It feels like data. It's actually closer to a rigged contest. There's a visibility problem layered on top. The wealthy households dragging the average upward are also the most visible ones. On social media, in your group chat, at the reunion. So you're getting hit twice. Once by the statistic, once by the highlight reel. And both are built from the exact same skewed slice of people. Meanwhile, the median household, the actual typical person your age, isn't posting anything because there's nothing dramatic to post. Boring, steady progress doesn't trend. Here's the part that really should bother you. This moving goalpost effect doesn't stop once you catch up. Go read about people who've actually crossed $1 million in net worth, and a striking number of them describe still feeling behind, still comparing themselves to whoever's one rung higher. If chasing the average doesn't even make the wealthy feel secure, it was never going to be the number that made you feel secure either. First, whenever you see a net worth benchmark, check whether it's labeled average or median before you let it change your mood. If a source only gives you one number without naming which it is, treat it as average by default. That's usually the one getting published because it's bigger.
Second, use median as your reality check, but don't stop there. Median just tells you you're not behind a skewed statistic, not that you're on track for your own goals. Calculate your personal number instead. Annual expenses times 25, the standard formula behind the crossover point this channel talks about constantly. That number is about your life, not a national survey. Third, track your own trajectory instead of a snapshot. A single comparison to any population, average or median, is a photo. What actually predicts your future is the slope of your own line. Is your net worth meaningfully higher than it was 2 years ago? That question matters more than where you land on someone else's chart today. Finally, if you want a sharper comparison than average or median, look up a percentile calculator for your age group specifically. Knowing you're in the 60th percentile tells you far more than either headline number ever will. And if you catch yourself doom-scrolling comparisons after watching a video like this one, mute it for a week. Not forever, just long enough to notice how much of that falling behind feeling was actually being manufactured by a feed, not by your bank account.
The average net worth chart isn't lying to you. It's just answering a different question than the one you're actually asking. Compare yourself to the median. Track your own trajectory and calculate your real number instead of chasing someone else's. Subscribe to the channel. Every week I break down the numbers behind the financial anxiety nobody bothers to fact check. Next video, the exact math behind the freedom number and how to calculate yours in the next 10 minutes. I'll see you there.